Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this Blitz chess postmortem, a postmortem of my Blitz game number 422. Before I get started, I have to admit that this game was a bit of a travesty. I built up a huge advantage in this game and somehow let it slip away. So anyway, I guess it's instructive from the point of view of how you should not play, or maybe how you need to play when you have the advantage, how you can maintain it. So we'll take a look at it from that point of view. I kicked off with d4. My opponent played e6, which is a reasonable move. It's actually quite flexible. If I continue with c4, for example, then he can play f5 and get a Dutch defense. And if I continue with e4, then he can play d5 and get a French defense. So that's the line I chose. But my opponent didn't go with d5 here, which you see is the top choice. Instead, he played knight f6. And so we get a position which is a bit unusual, and it's not that great. For black, frankly. It's like a bad version of the Alechen's defense. So if I were to continue with bishop g5, which is, see, the top move in the database, that doesn't really gain a whole lot. It turns out that black can defend against the pin. Let's see, after bishop g5, he can even play d5 and ignore the pin. If I try to push on with e5, he kicks the bishop with h6. And you get kind of a double-edged position, but no great advantage for white. But you can get a real significant advantage with the move e5 here. It kicks the knight, and then kick it again. And then the knight probably should just go back to b6. That would be the normal move in this position. And what we'd have is an Alechen's defense where black has played the move e6 instead of the move d6, which is the normal way the Alechen's defense is played. You play d6 to undermine the center and get some action going immediately. So it's like a bad version of Alechen's defense, and pretty good for white. My opponent dropped back to e7, and we're just out of the opening book at this point. And you can see there's a strong advantage for white, and I play well for a while, so the advantage increases. Also because my opponent is playing these moves like c6 that aren't doing a whole lot. So the edge for white goes up, and in fact, black even wastes a move here with c5. So he's taken two tempos to get the pawn from c7 to c5. And after knight c3, I have quite an advantage. It's really pretty amazing, getting an advantage like +2 right out of the opening. He takes on d4. And so already at this point you can start to think about sacrificial ideas, or it's not a sacrifice exactly, just but you don't have to recapture this pawn right away. You should think about well, what's your most active move here? Because if you look at the position, I've castled, I've got 3 pieces developed. He hasn't castled, he has only 1 piece developed, and I have more control in the center. So this is really a huge advantage for white, and I don't really need to grab this pawn back. I can continue attacking with a move like knight b5. And in fact, this is a really dangerous threat because knight to d6 is checkmate. So that has to be dealt with. Forces a move like, well, and this knight needs to move. It could go to c6 or g6. Right now, knight e to c6 seems to be favored. And then bishop to g5, just supported by the knight there, attacking the queen. So we just get a very active position here, and this pawn can be rounded up at some later point. I guess the main idea here is just keep getting your pieces out and keep making threats, and you'll find a way to break through. Instead, I just reflexively grab the pawn back, still with an advantage because I have such a lead in development that it's hard for him to counteract it at this point. And the threat of knight d5 is still there, and I play it at this point. So I've spotted some of the ideas here at least, and this is always a good move. But I should follow up. He chases the queen back. I need to follow up with the move bishop to f4. It's a very logical consequence or partner. The move bishop f4 is a nice partner to the move knight b5 because they coordinate on these squares, these dark squares in black's camp. So those are the thematic ideas in this position that I was looking for. Instead, I was thinking about how I don't want to trade queens, and I wanted to move the queen away from this line so that my light squared bishop will be free to move. It's not a bad idea, it's just not the best idea in the position. And if I were going to move my queen, it would be better to move it to the f3 square where it's more active and it makes a threat. Instead, I just moved it to e2. So kind of two mistakes in one. Not the best idea, and even with the idea I had, not the best execution of that idea. So a6 was played to kick my knight away. And here, yet another instructive moment. This is a threat that can actually be ignored. This is a time where my position is so strong, I can sacrifice a whole piece here. Play the move bishop f4, and just let him take the knight. Because I can take back with my knight. I get another knight on d5, the replacement knight, and I'm still have all these threats to the dark squares in black's camp here. And how can he defend against them all? He plays knight e to c6. This knight to d6 idea would be pretty devastating. Well, actually, that's let's see how this goes. Knight e to c6. Can't I? Oh yeah. If I tried knight d6 now, this the bishop guards that square. Okay, but I can play knight c7 now, and the king still has to move, and then I can grab the rook in the corner. So I get my material back, and I still have the advantage in development, and my opponent is not castling in this position. So interesting way to play. Instead, after a6, I retreated my knight, still with an advantage. So after a few more moves, he develops some pieces, and I try to get my knight back in the game. And well, we're both getting our pieces out in kind of a logical fashion. He's easing his situation by trading some pieces off. This is a good idea, but somewhere around here there's also one more opportunity I have. Maybe this is the final one. He's harassing my bishop here, and I didn't particularly want to give it away, so I dropped it back to c1. This is often an idea. The bishop is out of the way of the rook, so it's not blocking anything, and it can support operations of the queen side and maybe go to the b2 square later. So, but the more active move, bishop to g5, is pretty interesting here. Notice that I've now got three pieces coordinating on the d8 square, and rook to d8 is a threat that needs to be dealt with. If he just plays h6, for example, rook d8 would win the queen for a rook and a bishop. So he needs to play something like bishop e7 or bishop d6 blocking. Looks like that's an idea here. And knight to d4. This just it leaves me with an active position and an edge. So I played bishop to c1, and we get the game goes into a range where it's more or less even. Both sides have chances at various points, but I wanted to kind of fast forward a little bit because there's no huge thing going on here. He had, I guess, one little note here. He had a better defense. I was attacking this pawn, of course, taking advantage of the pin, and he just moved it forward to g6, which is reasonable, but he could also have defended a little more actively with bishop to d4, which not only defends the pawn, but attacks my loose knight on c3. And in fact, this loose knight on c3 turns out to be a problem in my position I didn't fully recognize. So anyway, he plays g6, and I just drop the bishop back, and he kicks my rook with f5. And it's a little bit tricky to find squares for the rook to go to. The engine recommends actually exchanging bishops first, or actually even giving up the exchange here. Bishop takes c5, f takes g4. Just my rook is so awkwardly placed over here, and queen e5 gains a tempo on the knight and starts to exploit some of my my misplaced pieces. And also, well, the thing about queen e5 is that if I move the knight out of the way, the queen is going to penetrate all the way to the back rank. So this is actually an awkward threat to deal with. If I try to defend the knight, with the move like bishop here, then, oh, I'm sorry, my bishop is pinned. I can't play that. Queen takes e2. Can I defend with my queen over here? Then queen takes c3 anyway. Oh, because the rook. Yeah, I have a real problem on the back rank. The rook is coming to the back rank. So queen e5 is a winning move here for black. He played queen to e7, and gives me time. He's hitting my rook, so I drop it back to h3. And now we are in the range of about even once again. And it stays that way for a little bit. Well, I need to, I'm trying to get I was recognizing this knight was awkwardly placed. I'm trying to get it back into the game somehow. I should go to c5 here. I'm not sure why I didn't recognize that idea, but I ended up just dropping it back to c3. And now queen c6 puts a little pressure on the knight, also threatens to come in here with check. So I block with f3. Now he plays b4, kicking my knight. Play knight to a4. And bishop to a6, hitting my queen. It looks like if he throws in queen c1 check, he can get quite an edge here, forcing my king to h2, which is where it ends up later in the game. So we'll see some similar ideas. Bishop to a6, hitting my queen. I drop here to f2. And then he plays rook to d1 check. And so this is kind of my last chance to save the game. I can bring my rook back to e1 and block that check, and it's about even. Instead, I ran to h2, and now it's all over. He has this queen d6 check. And, well, I could try blocking with f4, but after f4 he has rook f1, supported by his bishop, and that's a pretty good position for black. But well, that would have been the best defense. Instead, I tried to block with the queen, and I ran right into this f4 pawn fork, and that's how the game ended. So kind of a disastrous game, but well, these things happen, and you try to learn your lessons from the game. And the main one here is trying to stay active with your pieces, especially when you have the advantage. You don't necessarily want to respond to every threat of your opponent, but you should look for active moves that you have that continue your edge, continue putting pressure on your opponent, and make threats of your own. Okay, leave any comments you have in the section below. I will see you again soon. Bye.